Hey, thanks for checking out this video. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe for me. Thanks. So I want to talk about speed or sprint training for team sport athletes. Not necessarily talking about track and field athletes when their actual sport is sprinting. So this is more for team sport athletes. So two primary concerns that coaches and athletes might have when programming sprinting and speed training work over the long term would be: one, how do you allow for progressive overload to occur? So how do you progress volume, frequency, intensity in the sprints and allow for that progressive overload to occur? And then secondly, how do you allow for your athletes to stay engaged with the sprint training? Just being able to run sets of 20-yard sprints or 30-yard sprints with full recovery, sprint 30 yards, walk back, full recovery, might just get redundant and boring for a lot of people. So how do you keep your athletes engaged when doing sprint training work? So to answer the first question, I think it's generally a good idea to start with shorter sprints, maybe 5 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards, depends on your sport, and gradually work up to longer distances. And so the reasons for this would be, as you run longer distances up to a certain point, you're going to be hitting higher velocities, therefore greater intensities. So if you start with shorter sprints and gradually work up to longer sprints, you are slowly exposing yourselves to higher intensities and you're not hitting that maximum effort or maximum intensity right off the bat. And secondly, if you're going from shorter sprints to longer sprints over time, you're naturally going to be increasing the volume of sprinting over time without having to change how many sprints you're doing per session. So now to the question of how to keep your athletes more engaged and what sort of drills to do or what sort of sprinting variations to do to make sure it's not just this redundant, everybody on the line, sprints however long you want to go, walk back, take your full recovery, and then do it again. So I think the most common one that people can do is just to race. Pair up athletes that are similar of speed or similar of athleticism and have them race together. You can do groups of 2, groups of 3, groups of 4, groups of 5, doesn't really matter, and make sure that they have the competitive element involved with their sprinting. And you can perform these races from different starting positions and starting these races off of different stimuli, whether it's a visual stimulus or an auditory stimulus or a touch stimulus. To learn how to incorporate things like that, check out some previous videos that I've done on my channel. And the next one that I really like, and I think it works with athletes of all ages, is a cat and mouse chase or rabbit chase. There's probably other names for this types of racing, but basically all you're going to do is you're going to have two athletes compete against each other, and they're going to play tag in a linear fashion. So all you're going to do is you're going to have the two athletes competing against each other. Both athletes are going to be in a advantageous position, but also in a disadvantageous position. So one example would be one athlete starting on their stomach. So they're in a disadvantageous position by starting on their stomach. And then the other athlete that they're competing against is 5 yards behind them. So that athlete is disadvantaged because they're behind. And then the first athlete or on their stomach is going to initiate the race by starting whenever he wants to go, and the athlete behind him has to chase him down and tag him. So you can see both athletes have their advantageous and disadvantageous position based on how they start. And the best part about doing these cat and mouse chases is you can make them more game-like or specific to an athlete's sport by incorporating other chaotic elements. So maybe if you're working with basketball players, you can have a third athlete in there that's setting a screen, so to say, where they have to try to obstruct the trailing athlete. There's just so many variations you can do with this cat and mouse game, and you really can be creative and allow the athletes to be creative and let them come up with certain ways to perform it. And then if you have access to some sort of a sled or a prowler or something like that, you can use those for resisted sprinting. And then you can do all the racing or some sort of competition with those. Maybe one athlete starts with a head start but has more weight on their sled than the athlete they're competing against. You can get really creative with those, however you want to implement them into your training program. Now to the question of frequency. In my personal opinion, I think it's a good idea to keep it in year-round, sprinting at least one time per week, all 52 weeks of the year, maybe a couple weeks off here and there. But I also think it's probably a good idea to sprint twice a week, 3 times a week, or even 4 times a week, depending on your sport and if you're dosing it appropriately. But I definitely wouldn't step away from sprinting or speed training for more than a month at a time. I think it's just a good idea to keep it in all year round. It's good for your hamstrings, it's good for neuromuscular efficiency, etc. I did a sprint video on why you should sprint, so you should check that out if you have any questions on it. That's all I got for this video. I appreciate everyone who took the time to watch it through its entirety. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button for me and share it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as well. Thank you. I really appreciate it.